Hello everyone, and welcome to my video about Banshees. This is a viewer request video. We had some inquiries about whether or not we could do some feeling into the energies of Banshees. Now, I sat with this energy. I didn't want to look up or read any of the lore around Banshees. Obviously, I know some. I didn't want to influence the energy in any way. I literally wanted the channeling and the information to come from Otherworld, pure, straight, if you like. So I've got my notebook with me and I've got the details of the channeled message I received. And then we might at the end pull some cards to get some clarity from the Morrigan. Now, there's a very good reason for that, or will become clear. So I sat with the energy of the Banshees. And so let's start off with how it's spelled. The anglicized version of it is Banshee. But in Irish, it's spelled Bean and then another word Si. And it's generally believed that Banshee or Banshee means, well, it means woman of the she. Ban is woman and she is the Tuatha De Danann, the people of Danu, after they lost their battle with the humans and agreed to go under the ground, and they became the She, which is who we know as the Fae. Um, However, they are different from elemental Fae. They are what we would call the kind of the humanized fairies. They're our height or taller. Yeah, and they look very human. So that's what Banshee literally means, the literal interpretation of it. But I asked Otherworld, what does Banshee mean? And they said, one who the ancestors love. And that didn't fit with any of the lore that I knew around banshees, these dark, scary women hanging out in trees, screaming, following people and screaming, scaring people. And when you hear their screams, someone in the family is going to die, and they're generally accepted to be like a harbinger of doom, right? So why would Otherworld say that the banshee is one who the ancestors love? So I asked, why do the ancestors love the banshees? And Otherworld said, because they're women of the ancestral chambers. Now, this fitted with the way Banshee has been interpreted in Irish tradition, in the sense that they're sort of known in Irish tradition as women of the fairy mounds. And the fairy mounds are what in Irish culture we would refer to as the burial mounds. So for Otherworld to refer to them as women of the ancestral chambers does fit with culturally their image of being women of the fairy mounds. But Banshee does not interpret literally in a linguistic way to women of the fairy mounds. It means woman of the she. So we've got she women who inhabit burial mounds who the ancestors love. And this sounds awfully to me like a barrow wight. From a sort of Anglo-Saxon point of view, barrow wights are spirits who protect the ones buried in the burial mounds. And they can be very intimidating and very scary. They can be very dangerous if they choose to be, or if you come with malintent or if you're disrespectful. So this really intrigued me because um, banshees tend not to be associated with protecting burial mounds. They tend to be associated with sort of hanging out in trees and screaming down streets and people hearing their cry in their homes or on the streets when someone's going to die. So this intrigued me where Otherworld were going with this. And so I asked, what do you mean they're women of the ancestral chambers, of burial mounds? How does this fit in with how banshees are known in common culture? And Otherworld said they come specifically to perform that role. And again, I was like, this sounds like a barrow wight. And I asked them, are they barrow wights? And they said, no, their role is different. So it's similar, but not the same. A barrow wight specifically protects that one burial mound, that one individual or that one mound, um, and the spirits and treasure within. In a way, protecting their dignity and that being breached in any way. Um, and so I asked Otherworld, you know, if they're not like barrow wights, but they come specifically to perform a role for the people of the chambers, what do they do? And Otherworld said that banshees are one of the people buried in the chambers. So they're one of the ancient ancestors. And they are nominated by that family to protect their line. Now, when I said, what do you mean, their line? The whole bloodline. So banshees are not scary things at all. They are someone or a spirit of an ancient ancestor that we would associate with the Tuatha De Danann, the Sidhe, the burial mounds of the Sidhe. And they guard the whole ancestral line, which means that that's why they come and warn when someone's going to die, right? Because they're not making that person die. They're not a scary spirit who, you know, inflicts death on families. They're like the Morrigan being a goddess of warning. They're warning a family that they protect. And this was a real twist on popular belief about banshees. And it took me some time to kind of get my head round what Otherworld were actually talking about, that the role of a banshee is completely contrary to modern understanding of them. And I wondered where that mistranslation had happened. Where had that understanding gone wrong? That they had gone from a protective, familial, ancestral spirit to a dark entity that forebodes death in a negative way. And Otherworld continued then to talk about banshees to me. And this is what they said. They said they are of the light. They are bright and shining. Now, this fits with another common interpretation of the word banshee to do with how it's spelled in the anglicised version of the word, which translates directly to bright shining one. Now, again, this is very intriguing because this is another dark presenting, believed to be dark and death bringing spirit that is described as a bright shining one. Now, as a very famous entity described as a bright shining one, whose name means bright shining one, it's Lucifer. Lucifer means bright shining one. And obviously that makes sense because he was an angel, right? Angels are bright and shining. So I thought it was very interesting how the other translation of Banshee from the anglicized version reflects a similar misconception that this dark presenting creature that's associated with death is actually bright and light and helpful. Um, and it brought to mind a quote to me. I think it's from the Book of Mary, from the Gnostic tradition, which is attributed to Jesus. And he says something like, you did not recognize me, for I was not wearing my clothes, or something like that. Um, I might try and look that up actually quickly. I can't remember what it is. No, I'll try and look it up later. But it's something, and Jesus is speaking to Mary, and he says something like, you didn't recognize me when you first saw me, for I was not wearing my clothes. And it talks about Jesus talked about sometimes presenting in a way that you don't immediately recognize the true nature of a being of light. And that really resonated with me with regards to the Banshee, that it's yet another being like the Morrigan herself who appears dark, but actually is here to help us into the light on our journey, and is just as valid a helper and as nice helper as beings of the light, of angels and whatever. The intentions are the same for us to develop and become our authentic true selves in our true power and understand our place in the energy of the universe. So it was very poignant, Otherworld, talking about banshees as beings of the light and of ancestral familial spirits that have been nominated by our ancestors to protect their entire bloodline. And when I asked what point in time they came from, Otherworld just said from time immemorial. So we're talking beyond recorded time, beyond recorded historical time. And this fits very well with being people of the ancestral mounds, people of the fairy mounds, because the ancestral our ancestors who built things like Newgrange are beyond written history, and commonly believed to have been magic or energetically powerful in some way, in a different way, from the time of magic, from the time of non-duality, I want to say. So I asked about whether banshees scream. You know, if this is a real thing, or whether people are just hearing screech owls and foxes and attributing it to banshees, whether it's like an urban myth. And Otherworld said yes, they do scream, but it is keening, nothing else, a lament. So the screech of the banshee is a sorrow, is a, well, keening is grieving, isn't it? It's a noise you make when you're grieving, publicly. So the Banshee's scream, Otherworld said, is a public lament for one of that bloodline. So yes, they are foretelling a death in the family that they protect, which is their own bloodline, but they aren't causing the death. It's not sinister in any way. They're grieving and lamenting the loss of that person because they love them, because they are one of their descendants. Um, and when I asked why they would do this, why they would publicly grieve in a way that was audible to living humans, Otherworld said, because it gets your attention. And that is its purpose. So again, we come back to this nature of the Banshee being very similar to the nature of the Morrigan, in the sense that she is a goddess of warning. She has told us herself that she is not a goddess of war. She does not seek conflict. She does not encourage conflict or death or bloodshed, which is, a common misconception, or maybe a deliberate misconception of her role, whether we've been deliberately misled down the centuries to think that she is dark or sinister when actually she's a protectorate. And the Banshee is the same. They are giving you a heads up, basically, that you're going to lose someone. And this has happened to me many years ago. I didn't hear a Banshee's scream, but the Morrigan told me that I was going to lose someone that I loved. And she told me exactly who they were. She told me who I was going to lose before I lost them. And that's a very difficult thing to hear, especially when it's someone who is not old and not expected to die. And as the person hearing that news and knowing that information, that's also a burden to bear. And that also makes me think of the Banshee, because in a way they carry this great weight, this great knowledge of who of their descendants they're going to lose. But I have to say, having had forewarning that I was going to lose this person, thanks to the Morrigan telling me in advance, it was probably about 6 to 9 months in advance. It didn't make the loss any easier, but it made the time leading up to the loss more precious, because there was none of the, I wish I'd spent more time with them. I wish I'd told them I loved them. I wish that I had spent more time with them. I wish, all the things that you regret when you lose someone suddenly, especially someone young and unexpectedly. To know in advance, even if you can't tell them, even if it feels like a weight, it's actually a massive gift to be able to know that you need to cherish and make the most of every single day that you have left with that person. And that is such a gift. And so it makes the Banshee's role more touching in a way, that even though they're communicating that grief in a way that we don't culturally understand anymore, and perhaps this is a throwback to where they came from, perhaps our ancestors, perhaps the Shi, perhaps the Tuatha De Danann, perhaps the cultures that they came from did grieve publicly and loudly. and flamboyantly. And perhaps the way that the Banshee communicates that loss and that wailing and loss of someone who is from their family is is their way of giving us time back with that person that we would have not necessarily had. Because like they said, it gets our attention. But also, they are honoring that person by grieving publicly for them in a way that's culturally appropriate for them from the time that the Banshees come from. It reminds me very much of when you see on Egyptian tomb paintings and you see the professional mourners that would walk behind the person's funerary cortege, and they would be putting ash and all sorts of things. They would be wailing and they would be putting ash and things on their faces, and throwing things over their heads, and they would often be bare-breasted or naked, in the sense that they were showing their grief in the most visceral, raw sense. They had almost torn off their clothes in grief at losing this person. And again, there's echoes of this. If you look at Islamic burial of funerary rites, there's echoes of this, putting ash or turning their face in certain ways, putting their ears like this in 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 great honor and reverence of the person. And you see this in Egyptian paintings as well, and you see this in other indigenous cultures as well, smearing themselves with ash and things as part of a funerary process. And certainly in the Middle East, public mourning, very audible public mourning. It has a name. I don't know the name of it. There's a very particular noise, a cry that women make when they've lost someone they love. And it's very public, and it's very loud. And they also touch their faces. And for me, as I'm talking about how the Banshees keen, those sounds, the Banshees wail, the Banshees keening, the Banshees lament, the words that Otherworld chose to describe that sound was not a screech. They've chosen very particular words associated with grief to describe the noise that the Banshee makes. And it reminds me, and they're always women, and it reminds me so much of this culture of public mourning, of the women, of their pain. And actually, that's such a cathartic, clearing thing to do. Because if you swallow down your pain, if you quieten your scream, that really affects you physically. That really hurts your physicality and your soul. And it's almost like you make yourself, calm is the wrong word, but you store yourself up problems for later, in the fact that if you push it back down, it's got to come out again sometime, and probably in an unhealthy way. So this way of mourning, of audibly and loudly and publicly, is actually an incredibly healing thing. And this is the gift that the Banshee gives us, that we've completely misunderstood as a culture. Now, whether this is a deliberate misdirection, I suspect it probably is. And it's probably from a time where early Christianity overtook paganism, and the knowledge of the paganism was then lost. And at that point, where the knowledge was lost, the nature of this was lost. And so it was effectively, I feel, either deliberately demonized, and I use that word very deliberately, or it was completely misunderstood and misinterpreted. But my intuition tells me that it was deliberately demonized to discourage the taking up of parts of those culture. You know, if you take away someone's culture, if you take away their knowledge of where they come from and who they are, they've nowhere to go but into your arms, you know, when they're lost. And it makes me think of indigenous peoples when you know, particularly the Victorians were quite bad for it. I mean, they did it to the Welsh in trying to destroy their language so that they would lose their cultural identity. They did it to the Irish, but also, you know, helpful people who were trying to, well, they thought they were being helpful, were trying to civilize the natives. Now, I'm not saying that from a personal belief point of view. I find that quite offensive, but that's what they thought they were doing. If you look at what they did to Indigenous peoples in Canada, in America, the Aboriginal population of Australia, the Indigenous peoples of New Zealand, and many other places, Pacific Islands, they the Christian missionaries came and took those people, took those children in a lot of cases out of their indigenous culture, out of the knowledge of their culture, wouldn't allow them to speak their language, wouldn't allow them to have knowledge of their indigenous religions, and cut them off completely and tried to make them in their own image. And this was, in some cases, I think in the missionary, from the missionaries' point of view, they believed that they were doing a good thing because they didn't understand the validity of those people's identities. But I think from a governmental level, it was quite deliberate in order to destroy those, and from a church point of view, potentially from an organizational point of view, a deliberate choice to eradicate other beliefs to control people. And I think this is what's happened to the Banshee and to the Morrigan. And not just because they are pagan beings, I won't say gods because they're not, they're us, but also because they're women. Because they're women. And just like happened to Mary Magdalene and to the oracles of Delphi and to all the wise, healing, protecting female beings, energies, they have tried to stamp them out. And I think this is what has happened to the Banshee. So I asked Otherworld why the Banshees protect their bloodline, why they have chosen to take on a ceremonial role, because they don't have names, do they? They just have the Banshee of whatever associated with this family, the O'Connors, the O'Haras, whatever. Why do they protect that bloodline or that soul line? And Otherworld said to me that they protect a bloodline, not a soul line, a bloodline. So our physical vessels, our the human bodies that we incarnate into. The Banshees protect the flesh and the blood of that line. Why? Why? I asked them. What's special about the bloodlines of those particular Banshees? I mean, yes, they might just be trying to protect their lineage as an individual, like a mother would protect her children. I'd do anything for my boys. Is it just that maternal instinct? But then why would they be nominated by the family? Why would they not just be an ancestral guide like we all have in our spirit guides? Why do they take on this ceremonial role for these particular bloodlines? And why are they associated with only Irish families? And Otherworld said to me that what is special about the bloodlines that the Banshee protect is EHP. And I said, I've heard of ESP, extrasensory perception. I never heard of EHP. What on earth is EHP that this bloodline has, right? These bloodlines have. And Otherworld said extra human premonitions. They're seers. So the bloodlines that the Banshees are trying to protect, they're not trying to protect their lineage through some instinct to protect their progeny. They're protecting these bloodlines because of what the bloodlines can do. Because of what those bloodlines are capable of. And what this was kind of where I was at with it, like what? So they said that the Banshees are ancestral protectors and portenders. So they're giving you heads up of the future, just like the Morrigan warnings, to protect you so that they can preserve, is a better word, preserve a bloodline that has abilities above normal human abilities, that is in the physical cells of the body, in the DNA. And Otherworlds described the Morrigan as the ultimate archetypal Banshee. Now, at this point, she came in and I asked her, I said, are you a goddess or are you an ancestral spirit? Are you a goddess? And she said, I like to think so, which I thought was brilliant. I think she's earned it considering all the crud she's put up with. But she said, the Morrigan said that she is, and the Banshees are, she is a Banshee, and the Banshees are an earthbound spirit guarding those with she blood. They're trying to protect the she blood. And I said, but you're protecting human families. And the Morrigan said, no, they're hybrids. And she specifically used that word. Now, I have met people in the line of my work whose souls are she, who have incarnated into human bodies and their souls are she. But what the Morrigan was saying about why Banshees exist and what they're doing is that she is saying the she created or hybridized with humans, and that they created humans effectively with extra additional superhuman abilities to see the future, see potential timelines, because they used the word extra human premonitions. So you're seeing potential future timelines. They created or bred themselves, their families, into humans to create humans that had additional abilities. And that is what they're protecting. They're protecting the DNA in our bodies that has extrasensory perceptions. This opens up such a can of worms with regards to why certain wars are started, why certain genocides are committed, why neurodivergence is potentially persecuted, why witches were burned. So many avenues now to think about why certain cultural or genetic lines throughout of history have been actively sought to be destroyed, and why we need banshees. So the Morrigan then proceeded to say that the banshees are carrying out a duty and a penance, she said. But it's collective, not individual. So that individual ancestral spirit that nominated themselves, stepped forward to perform the role of the Banshee to protect that DNA through all time to now, not in future, to protect them, to get them here now, because now is important. That's what they said. They were only protecting them till now, this time particularly. And it was a duty and a penance, but it was collective. And why I said, why a penance? Why do you use the word penance that's collective? And Morrigan said, penance for the humans, but it's a labor of love for the she. So there's this dual role in that the ancestral spirit, who is a she human hybrid, one of the original ones, is clearing or working through familial karma for the humans by doing their duty, but also from the she point of view is keeping their line alive through us, through our own bodies. And that's why they love us so much, and that's why they want to help us so much. She used the words labor of love. And she said, what they're trying to clear for the humans, the karma that the human part of the hybrid ancestor that fulfills the dutiful role of Banshee is trying to clear for that family, is their role in persecuting those magical, she said. Those humans in that family who either denied to themselves or didn't understand that they were hybrid, part she, that they may have persecuted their own kinfolk and been part of the sort of lynch mobs and burnings and beatings and exterminations of their own kinfolk, she said. And the Banshee helps pay for that in their service. She used the word service. So and now I understand why they had to nominate themselves, because this is a tough call, you know, as a soul, nominating yourself to take on the role of Banshee for your family line, is taking on the karma of families who unwittingly or wittingly have hurt their own through ignorance and demonization, because they didn't want to accept, or weren't aware of the fact that they were she-human hybrids. And that meant that those skills that made them accused of being witches or demons or possessed were actually the natural result of that bloodline, and should be cherished and protected. And you know, that's a big commitment for a soul, to take on that amount of karma of other people and to try and serve your way through it across millennia. You know, you've got to have a big heart to do that, haven't you? And you can understand now why the Banshee perhaps present as dark, cloaked figures, because the weight of a negative energy put upon them by the actions of the human part of their lineage is immense, and I have such respect for them, actually, now, knowing what they've done for us, a sacrifice of themselves to protect their descendants. You know, it's really admirable and amazing. And the Morrigan also said, I said, why do they need protecting? And she said that they're targets, and they've always been targets, this bloodline. There are those who have sought to exterminate them, and that they don't deserve that, she said. They don't deserve that, because they are magical and beautiful. And the Morrigan also said that acceptance, that humans accepting that they are she-human hybrids, or those lines are accepting, if you have those gifts, that's where they came from, can heal something within your soul. That it's an important part of non-duality. It's an important part of living authentically, of accepting who you truly are, and why your gifts are, and loving all parts of yourself. And the Banshees have sacrificed themselves to protect those people from those who seek to keep them small and controlled, where they can't exterminate them. And so to accept that part of yourself and to love it and embody it and celebrate it would make your family Banshee so happy, because that means that their sacrifice was not for nothing, you know. And the Morrigan also explained why people with these bloodlines, why you often, even if you're not aware that you have any sort of extrasensory gifts, why you might feel like you don't like being on Earth, why you might feel like you don't like being incarnated, like you feel a fish out of water, like you feel like you don't fit in. She said it's because the earth energy, the earthbound energy, she used that term, is too low for the she part of your DNA. That the frequency on earth is too low for that part of you. You're above where the energy in which you were born into. And so you often feel like you're not matching the energy of those around you because you literally don't. You're on a different wavelength in a literal sense. And she also said this is why so many of us are waking up at the moment, because the ascension process, the awakening process, um, the leaning into God consciousness, the leaning into the Christ light, whatever, being in a yogic bliss state, meditating, all these things, whatever cultural lineage you want to go down to achieve that sense of peace in your soul. She said that that process is providing the necessary frequency for the hybrids. So if you are from one of the hybrid bloodlines and you are going through an awakening process, you feel happier and more yourself because the frequency that you're holding as somebody who's awakening is more suited to the she part of your DNA, which I thought was just a wonderful explanation for why you feel like you're coming home when you go through this process. So that's what Spirit told me about Banshees. I am going to put my notebook there. I am going to read some cards just to see if they want to add anything else about this. So I'm using the Call of the Morrigan Oracle, and that is by Stephanie Woodfield and Karen Storminger, and the art is by Naomi Cornett. Okay, so is there anything that you would like to add about the true nature of the Banshee? Is there anything that you would like to tell us about the true nature of the Banshee that we haven't? Ah, now, this is not the Well of Slain. I was literally just talking to someone about this. I think it's Selena. I'm going to check though, because I don't want to butcher the Gaelic. I think it is the Well of Selena, but I will make sure. Slaughter. The Well of Slaughter. Now, this is rejuvenation and healing. And if you see here, this really sums up what we've been talking about in the fact you've got the very nature spirits, earthbound spirits, you've got mushrooms, you've got the incarnated earth, you know, the physical plane. And then you've got the hand coming out of all this ether here. Where is it? And this card, it's there. There's a hand like reaching out of this tumult of this mess of water and leaves and wind and all the elements. But then you've got the circling ravens. The Morrigan, the ultimate banshee, described herself as the ultimate archetypal banshee, the ultimate familial, ancestral protector spirit and awakener. And so this one card actually sums up the whole nature of the role of the Banshee. And the fact it's a card of healing and rejuvenation, that's exactly what they're doing. They're getting us to heal. Well, they're protecting us, but they're also getting us to heal all parts of ourselves, to accept the totality of who we are, and to get us to this point in time. Now, I've remembered something that they told me, and I don't know why I've not read it. Perhaps I went off. Is they were talking about why they wanted to get us to this point in time. Yes. So the Banshee are they're going to start to leave. Their job is done. So that was the other thing, because talking about this point in time reminded me that they had said that from between 2027 and 2032, they're going to start leaving, and they can move on like you'd move on a normal ancestral spirit. So their job was to keep us alive, keep their line, their she blood alive till now. And till this point in time, 2026 and beginning of 2027. And once we've gone through this time, they don't need to be here anymore. They don't need to protect us. And so the job done, she said. So they're going to leave. And you can move your Banshee on in 2027, your familial ancestral Banshee, if you're from an Irish family, just like you would do any other ancestral spirit in a psychopomp work, and release them of their duty. My nose is itching, which always means a spirit energy moving. And what they said was that when you release the Banshee, they will turn from dark to light, because all the negative energy, all the negative karma that they held for the whole bloodline, for the human side of their bloodline, will be relinquished, will be done, let go, burned up, as they say in India, burn up the karma, and turned into love. And they will once again turn into these brilliant, light, shining souls that we all are, which I thought was lovely. And one of the other reasons we see them as dark is because they're one of us, we perceive them from where we are. So what they were saying was that some people see a dark, cloaked, scary figure and hear screams, and some see angels with trumpets. So depending on whether you're in fear or whether you're in love, you're going to see the same ancestral spirit, the same Banshee, in a different way. And I thought it was very interesting how they made an analogy with angels. So you may well have seen a Banshee and not even known, because they meet you where you are. So they may have appeared to you not how we understand a Banshee to be at all. And it's interesting how very God-fearing Christian folk, when people saw them or heard them in rural Ireland, saw them as scary figures. And perhaps that fear made them lower energy, and so the Banshee manifested as a lower energy. But they don't have to. If you meet them in love, or if you meet them in joy or excitement or non-fear, in a neutral way, you will meet a being that looks completely different to what your understanding of a Banshee is. And I thought that was fascinating. They talked about them doing soul work of helping to protect. And they're supporting us to forgive our ignorance, and see our observations. This is what they said: see our observations as clouds in the sky, but the soul itself is the sky. So they're encouraging us, well, again, it's to relinquish preconceptions and see them, see ourselves as vast and undisguised and open, and that our thoughts and our preconceptions are just fripperies and nonsense, and they just let them float away. And the Banshees say that now it's time for them and us to be fully seen. This is their time. This is our time. This is the time that they spent millennia trying to get us to intact. And when I asked why, they said to be seen as I too fully see. So they're talking about awakening, aren't they? They're talking about realizing we're a wider part of the universe, and they and also to accept that we're hybrids, basically. Um, uh, and their whole existence was to get us to now in time. And all this time they've been trying to keep us alive and on the right path and out of the darkness till now. And safe from corruption, they said. So there's a sense here that the Banshees weren't just protecting us, and they weren't just trying to burn up or eat up our karma, sin eaters for us, but um they were also trying to protect us from ourselves and from falling into even lower energy. Um and and now their job's done, largely. Well, not exactly now, but by early 2027, the Banshees role will no longer be necessary. Um, so the Morrigan's role card, not Morrigan, the Morrigan as the archetypal Banshee, but the Banshee's role came up as this whole process, this process that we've had to go through in order to get to here. And the underlying energy of that is luck. Now, this is, you could be rewarded or you could be fall into decay. And there's very much this sense that it wasn't a given that we would get here. It was not a given that we'd get here. They had to perform this sacred role for us, this sacrifice for us, because there was a concerted effort by some other types of human to and other types of being to try to make sure that we didn't make it to here. Those of us with those lines. Okay, so what's going to happen now then? Why now? Why now? It's karmic. It's karmic. It's the releasing. It's a culmination. This is a releasing of karma. Look, we've got forgiveness. We've got forgiveness, but we've got the Morrigan forgiving and giving milk to Cuchulainn. So the Cuchulainn rejected the Morrigan. Perhaps she was his Banshee. Um, I think she was his Banshee. And he rejected her, and she loved him anyway. She nourished him anyway, and she protected him all the way to the end. Even though he was fated to die in a certain way, she stood with him the whole time to protect him. And so, but we've got holy cows here, protecting the sacred, forgiving the past, to get to here to protect the sacred. But there's a feeling of releasing karma here, like all of it, all the stuff we've ever done as humans. We need to release it to accept now that we have to let the heaviness go. We've got another card of Cuchulainn here. This is Cuchulainn when he ended his own son. So this is regret. This is forgiving the terrible things that you've done. Why now, though? Why now? Why is that now? The underlying energy of that is the Paps of Anu. Now, Anu is the ancestral goddess of those same families. Now, what's the Paps of Anu mean? The Paps of Anu is a connection to the land of the interconnectedness of all things. An interconnectedness of all things. Pay attention to the world around you and see the interconnectedness of all life. There you go. It talks about nature. And in fact, the Morrigan was talking about this the other day, wasn't she? Understanding that we are not just this. We are everything. We are every single atom on the planet. We are all of it. We are in all of it. We can change all of it. We are like I can hear her saying you're like a quantum computer. You can process and manipulate all of it, the data of realizing your true power. But in order to understand that we are interconnected, that we are everything, and that we are she and they are us, or some of us are, not all of us by all accounts, if some of us are trying to get rid of us, that we need to release the heaviness and pain of the past. And there's something about now in time that allows us to do that. There's like a window of opportunity. And this is what Gwyn ap Nuith was talking about as well, wasn't it? That now was the only time that he could be freed from his bonds. Why now? What is special? What is special about now? What is special about now? Are these the right cards to use? Maybe not for that. I'm going to go with these ones. What's special about now that means this is the only time to get us to now? A spark, a chance, something, creation, intuition as the underlying energy, trusting your intuition. That's about know thyself. I heard her say, know thyself. Love it. Oh, it's loads falling on the floor. Unexpected visitors. Get this a lot, don't we? Right, so what is it about now? And wizard awareness, wizard of awareness. What is it about now? And magic stream and education. Something is happening now that couldn't happen before. At this point in time, what is this spark? I'm looking in the wrong book. That doesn't help, does it? Goodness me, honestly. A spark. You are a clear channel for divine creativity. So we've got, you're a clear channel for divine creativity. The card of intuition, unexpected visitors, wizard powers, learning, and the magic stream. This is awakening. So why now? Because we're waking up. This could only happen now because you weren't awake enough. So wizard of awareness is your soul knows best. Be still and observe. So yeah, this is all awakening. Experiences evolve from one state to another in a continual shifting change, no matter how much you want things to stay the same. A shift. Something is happening energetically now, depending on what school of thought you're from. You know, the shift, the split, the awakening, whatever. The golden palace is the underlying energy. This is that. This is awakening. This is the bliss state. This is the big shift into wider consciousness. So that's why, that's where we're at that point in time. But the Morrigan, the Banshee, is telling us actually what we need to do. We need to let it go. We need to let go everything we've ever done, however terrible, forgive ourselves just like she forgave him, even though he rejected her. And realize we're interconnected. We're all one. This is about, this is about coming back together, not just, I've got to cover this up because it's a naked person, but peace. Now, the Morrigan's prophecy says peace to the heavens and back down again. Are we in that time of the Morrigan's prophecy? Peace to the heavens and back down again. Because in her prophecy, she talks about the cows and the bulls. These were, cows that were stolen in the great cattle raid. That is another famous Irish story. Again, and that started a war. So, this is forgiveness, forgiveness of self, them forgiving us, the she forgiving us forgiving the she, us understanding that we are them and they are us, that we're all interconnected, us understand peace coming, peace is coming, and understanding that everything comes in cycles. This is some great turning that means that this time now is the only time, this is the time they had to get us to in order for us to then do the work or fulfill our potential. I'm hearing her say what they made us for. There you go. So, don't be scared of banshees because they are they love us, and they're only made dark by the weight of what they carry for us so that we don't have to. The things we've done to ourselves. And all they ask is that we understand ourselves better and our place in the universe and the nature of what we're capable of so that we can fulfill the peace that they crave. The peace that they crave so that they can go, so their job is done and they will go. I'm just going to quickly ask these cards. The Mary Magdalene Oracle by Megan Watterson. Oh, and I didn't tell you what those other cards were. They were the Enchanted Map by Colette Baron Reid. The Mary Magdalene Oracle, because we talked about the, not recognizing Jesus from the clothes he was wearing, not recognizing the goodness of the Banshee from the darkness they carry on our behalf. So do these cards want to tell us anything? A message from the Banshees to us. A message from the Banshees to us. What would the Banshees like to say to us? They want us to trust ourselves. I trust what my soul desires, following your instinct, because it is true. There you go. Be true to yourself. But also, this is the card of travel. This is Mary going to France with her daughter in the Gnostic tradition. This is the card of moving on into a new life where there isn't conflict, moving away from the conflict. The underlying energy is the soul. I am free. I am free. I have not bound anything. And that's what and interestingly, she's wearing a black cape, isn't she, in both these, just like the Banshee and just like the women of the stones as well, the women of the burial mounds that I see, and just like the Morrigan. It's interesting how they chose those cards, isn't it? So their message for us is that they want us. I just bit my lip. Ow! They want us to follow our instinct because we need to trust ourselves. because our soul's speaking to us and we need to let it go, forgive ourselves, and live our authentic selves to fulfill our potential. Is there anything else you want to say? Is there anything else you want to say about that? Is there anything else you want to say about that? Not with those cards. I won't use this deck. This is the Rooted Woman Oracle by Sharon Blackie. Is there anything the Banshee would like to say to us? A message? Vision and inspiration. The mountain with the soaring bird. Still looking. They'll still be watching. They're still going to be watching us. Even when we're living in our creativity and vision and we're, inspired by understanding who we truly are and letting our souls lead and seeing the rewards of that and so leaning into it because it's a, a, a cumulative thing like a snowball, isn't it? You've got to start doing it in order to gain the confidence to trust it to keep going. But there's a sense that they'll still be hovering above us, like that hawk, like Lady Isis, just making sure that we're okay, because the training wheels have come off, haven't they, according to the Morrigan. There you go. And letting go, the fall, just free falling. Trust it. And the maker, the old woman of dreams, the maker of visions, dreaming up your future. And that's what they say we're capable of, isn't it? We're capable of creating our own reality. And now is the time. So I think that we should all be very grateful for the Banshees because my goodness me, that was not what I was expecting at all. And my goodness me, the weight they carry for us as our ancestor spirits is immense. So if you have any extrasensory or clairs, any extrasensory perceptions or clairs, you have any Irish ancestry, then please do thank your Banshee for everything they've done because I think it's about time we gave them the recognition they deserved.